The 16-kilometer hull rotated like a moon-changing phase. No sound, just a slow turn against the star field, its black surface drinking light and giving nothing back. The weapon arrays tracked across empty space, not at the four Kroth ships but at the void between them. A geometry lesson. Brock Thren, War Master of the Kroth Dominion, stood on his flagship's bridge and watched his entire understanding of the galaxy rewrite itself in 22 seconds. He had called it a floating coffin. Then the coffin inhaled. The Deep Scatter's longest-running survey had just found something that didn't fit any category. And now, 7,000 years of Kroth military doctrine was about to collapse into a single, undeniable fact. The humans had built this thing, and they had built it to wait. On Anchor Station Cade, Admiral Sierra Cade pressed send on an open channel. 6 words, the same calm voice she used for coffee orders and casualty reports. The galaxy called it abandoned. The ship called it ready. The transmission left her station and began its 58-hour journey to the Deep Scatter. She did not watch it go. She picked up her dented tin canteen, took a cold sip of black coffee, and waited. I wish I could tell you they fired. They didn't. But if you want to understand what happened next, why a dead ship woke up and a War Master forgot how to speak, you need to go back 3 weeks, to the cartographer's lament. To the moment a Zethari archaeologist looked at a scan and said, "That's not a wreck." 3 weeks earlier, the cartographer's lament drifted through the Deep Scatter's outermost quadrant. The ship was a survey cathedral, 800 meters of brass and pale stone, its corridors lined with specimen jars and holographic records, its air thick with the smell of old paper and ozone. 400 researchers had lived aboard for years, cataloging the remains of dead civilizations. They had found 2,800 of them. They had never found one that was only sleeping. Arkenvel, lead archaeologist, 198 years old, had seen more derelicts than any other living Zethari. He had written 7 monographs on the decay patterns of abandoned orbital platforms. He could identify a species' shipbuilding philosophy from a single hull fragment. When the deep-range scanner pinged an object at the edge of their survey grid, he expected another dust-choked tomb. He pulled up the image on his personal slate. The object was long and dark, with no visible thrusters, no windows, no markings. It was 16 kilometers from nose to tail. Its hull returned no light. The scanner had to infer its shape from the shadow it cast against the cosmic microwave background. Category 3 anomaly, he said to his assistant, Nissa, a young Zethari who had been with the survey for only 12 years. Another dead giant, probably Kroth construction from the early expansion. They never maintained their outer hulls. Nissa squinted at the slate. The density reading is wrong. That's not any metal, I know. It's absorbing everything, not reflecting, absorbing, like it's eating the scan. Arkenvel waved a 4-fingered hand. Then we flag it for a follow-up visit. The consortium has protocols. We don't rush. But Nissa had already run a spectral analysis. The results flashed across her own slate. She blinked once, twice, then set the slate down very carefully as if it might bite her. Arken, the composition doesn't match any known builder, not Kroth, not Zethari, not even the old Thren foundries. Then what is it? She looked up, pale eyes wide. The database returned a partial match. Human, Terran Naval Registry, but that can't be right. The humans don't have anything this size. Their entire fleet could fit inside this thing's cargo bays. Arkenvel took the slate. He read the data. He read it again. Then he did something he had not done in 50 years. He called for a priority override on the survey's chain of command. That priority override set off alarms in 3 different star systems. The Zethari Consortium, which had been cataloging the Deep Scatter for 1,600 years, had a rule. Every find was cataloged before it was touched. But Arkenvel's override skipped that rule. Within 6 hours, a military escort was dispatched from the nearest Kroth garrison. The Kroth Dominion had a rule too. Every unknown was boarded before it was feared, and the Croth did not like unknowns. War Master Brock Thren received the summons while reviewing campaign reports from the Siege of Korath, the one where he had lost his left secondary arm. He had been a veteran of 6 campaigns, conqueror of 4 systems, and he did not appreciate being pulled away from his victory celebrations for a Zethari archaeological curiosity. "Human," he said, his voice like gravel in a metal drum. "I've seen human ships. They're the size of my personal launch. They have weak point defense and slower than light drives. They're barely a footnote in the Dominion's tactical briefings." His first officer, a younger Croth with fresh copper scales, hesitated. "The report claims the object is 16 kilometers long, War Master. That's larger than our flagship." Brock Thren's jaw clicked, the sound he made when he was annoyed. "Zethari exaggerate. They measure from the edge of every debris cloud. Mark my words, it's a hollow asteroid with some atmospheric contamination. We'll board it, find nothing, and I'll be back in time for the medal ceremony." He ordered his 4-ship escort squadron to make best speed. They would arrive in 18 days. 18 days was enough time for the signal to travel from the cartographer's lament to the nearest relay station. Enough time for a junior comms officer on Anchor Station Cade to flag a priority message. And enough time for Admiral Sierra Cade to finish her 3rd cup of cold coffee while reviewing personnel transfers. She was 54 years old, with gray-streaked hair and the quiet certainty of someone who had spent 38 years in Earth Naval Command. She had commanded 3 border actions, skirmishes, really, against minor raiders, and she had never lost a ship. Her reputation was built on preparation, not aggression. She carried a small brass sextant in her coat pocket, a gift from her first commanding officer, and every morning she touched it to remind herself that Earth was still there, even when she couldn't see it. The priority message arrived on a Tuesday. She read it twice. Then she set down her canteen, very slowly, and called her senior staff to the briefing room. "The Zethari have found something in the deep scatter," she said. "A Terran naval vessel, Dreadnought class." "Name the sleeper." Her tactical officer, a younger woman named HSU, frowned. "We don't have any dreadnoughts, Admiral. The biggest ship in our inventory is the cargo carrier Ark Royal, and that's only 800 meters. According to the Zethari registry, the sleeper was commissioned 73 years ago. That's before I was born. It was listed as decommissioned after a single classified mission. The records are redacted, but the registry says it's ours." Silence. Sierra Cade touched the sextant in her pocket. The needle still pointed to Earth, as it had for 38 years. But she knew, somewhere deep in her bones, that this discovery was going to change the direction she faced. "The Croth have already dispatched a boarding party," she continued. "They'll arrive in," she glanced at the screen, 14 days. "We can't get there in time with a fleet, but we can send a retrieval team, a small ship, fast. I want Captain Verk's Shrike prepped within the hour." HSU nodded, but she looked uncertain. "Admiral, if that vessel is really ours, and we don't know anything about it, what exactly is the retrieval team supposed to do? Board it? Claim it? The Croth will have already taken it by the time we arrive." Sierra Cade smiled faintly. "They'll try to board it, but if it's been sitting in the deep scatter for 73 years, unclaimed, unarmed, with no signs of activity," she paused. "Let's just say I have a feeling it's not going to cooperate with the Croth." She didn't explain why she felt that way. She didn't mention the classified file she had accessed 3 years ago, the one that mentioned a project called Blackwell and a construction run that had never been officially authorized. She simply gave the orders, watched her canteen cool in the briefing room's stale air, and waited for the Shrike to launch. Captain Rin Verk was 41 years old, wiry and quick, with a patched pressure suit and a reputation for getting into places he wasn't supposed to be. His ship, the Shrike, was a 76-meter corvette designed for retrieval operations, with a minimal crew of 6 and engines that could push it to near-light speeds if he was willing to risk the hull strain. He got the order while running diagnostic checks on the Shrike's navigation array. He read it, folded the paper, and tucked it into his jacket pocket next to a half-eaten ration bar. "Deep scatter," he muttered. "That's a long way for a retrieval run." His first officer, a quiet woman named Dorn, looked over his shoulder. "The Admiral says we're to secure a derelict, human-made supposedly. The Kroth are already on site. Then we're going to be late." "Admiral says that's the point. She wants us to arrive after they've opened it." Verk squinted. "Opened it? You mean boarded it?" "She said opened it, sir. Those were her exact words." Verk considered that. Then he strapped into the pilot's seat, fired up the engines, and sent the Shrike hurtling toward the edge of known space with an acceleration that made the hull groan. He had no idea what he was flying into, but he knew Admiral Cade didn't waste words, and if she said opened it, she meant something more than just a hatch. While the Shrike burned through the void, the cartographer's lament conducted preliminary scans of the object. Arkenvel had ordered a close-range survey, despite protests from the Zethari bureaucracy. The ship's sensors probed the hull, mapping its contours, its composition, and its interior structure. What they found made no sense. The hull was not a single piece of metal. It was a layered composite, each layer absorbing a different frequency of light, sound, and energy. The object was not built for visibility. It was built for invisibility, for being overlooked. Arkenvel had never seen a ship designed to be ignored. But the strangest part was the interior. The scans showed empty space, vast, open corridors, hangar bays, and an engine core that was cold but not dead. It wasn't a wreck. It was a structure waiting for a signal. Nissa, who had been cross-referencing every known Terran design, finally found a match. A single engineering schematic from a declassified Earth Naval Archive, labeled Project Blackwell Architecture of Waiting. The schematic showed a vessel that matched the object's dimensions, but the notes were sparse. Only one line stuck out. "The sleeper will not fire. It will not move. It will simply be present until the moment it is no longer necessary to wait." Nissa read that line aloud to Arkenvel. He stared at her for a long moment. "That's not a warship," he said. "That's a promise." The Kroth escort arrived on schedule. Brock Thren's flagship, a 2-kilometer battlecruiser named Dominion's Claw, dropped out of FTL in a shower of blue-white radiation. The 4 smaller ships formed a defensive perimeter around the object, which hung in space like a slice of nothing. Brock Thren stood on his bridge, peering at the visual feed. The object was indeed large, larger than he had expected, but it was dark, inert, and utterly silent. "Boarding party," he ordered. 20 Marines, thermal lances, and environmental seals. I want a full report within the hour." His first officer hesitated. "War Master, we have no intel on the interior layout. The Zethari scans are." "The Zethari scans are from a survey vessel, not a military-grade scanner. They don't know what they're looking at. Send the boarding party." The boarding shuttle launched from the Claw and nosed toward the object's flank. There was no visible docking port, no airlock, no surface feature that suggested an entry point. But as the shuttle approached, a section of the hull opened, silently, seamlessly, as if it had been expecting them. Brock Thren watched the feed. "Well, at least it's not locked." The Marines entered the interior. The corridors were clean, well lit by an ambient glow from the walls, with breathable atmosphere and standard Terran gravity. They walked for 100 meters, then 1,000, finding nothing but empty halls and sealed doors. "War Master, we're not seeing any life signs, no active systems. Just a lot of empty space." Brock Thren clicked his jaw. "It's a ghost. Move to the engine deck. I want to see what powers this thing." The Marines proceeded deeper, descending through levels of dormant machinery. The lighting shifted from white to a faint red as they approached the core, and then they stopped. War Master, we found something, a central interface. The Marine's voice faltered. It's powered on, there's a screen, it's displaying a single word, ready. Brock Thren's primary arms folded across his chest. Ready for what? The Marine didn't answer, because at that moment the red light that had been pulsing slowly throughout the vessel, the one they had assumed was a standby beacon, suddenly turned green. And the engine started. Not a sound, a pressure. A subsonic thrum that passed through the hull of the Dominion's claw, through the Croth Marine suits, through the bones of every being within 100,000 kilometers. The 16-kilometer hull emitted a faint heat signature, and its weapon arrays that had been hidden inside the hull's layers, slid out of their recesses and began tracking across the sky. Brock Thren's jaw clicked 3 times in rapid succession. All ships' battle stations, fire on that. He stopped. The arrays weren't targeting his ships. They were targeting the empty space between them, a demonstration. His first officer, scales pale, whispered, "War Master, we have incoming transmissions from 9,000 monitoring stations. Every species in the galactic conclave is reporting a Terran weapons platform active in the deep scatter. Threat level, unprecedented." Brock Thren stared at the feed. The object, the sleeper, continued its slow rotation, its weapon arrays painting geometric patterns on the void. It had not fired a single shot. It did not need to. He had treated a sleeping god like a museum piece. On the cartographer's lament, Arkenvel watched the readings on his slate. The energy output from the object had spiked from 0 to, he did the math twice, the equivalent of a small star's gravitational binding energy. And it was all contained, channeled, controlled. He turned to Nissa. "We need to update the registry." She was already typing. "What do I list as the status?" Arkenvel looked at the object, which was now rotating fully, its black hull seeming to drink the very starlight. "Active," he said. "Unclassified." Nissa paused. "Unclassified. We've never had an unclassified object in the registry." "Then we're adding one." On Anchor Station Cade, Admiral Sierra Cade had just received the first translated burst of data from the deep scatter. She read the sequence of events: the boarding party, the red light, the green light, the engine start, the weapon arrays targeting empty space. She set down the report and picked up her sextant. The needle still pointed to Earth, but for the first time, she wondered if Earth was the only place she needed to look. She opened a comm channel to the Shrike. "Verk, you're on approach." "What do you see?" Verk's voice crackled through the speakers. "Admiral, I see a lot of Croth ships running away, and one big black thing that's just floating. It's not shooting, it's just there." "Don't approach it, wait." "Wait for what?" "For the transmission to reach them. I sent it 58 hours ago. They'll get it in," she checked the clock, "about 2 hours. Then they'll know what to do." Verk was silent for a moment. "Admiral, what exactly did you send?" Sierra Cade touched the sextant again. "I sent them 6 words, and I sent the ship a question it's been waiting 73 years to hear." She did not elaborate. She simply poured another cup of coffee, cold, and waited for the sleeper to answer. The transmission arrived at the sleeper's hull 2 hours after Sierra Cade sent it. It crossed the void as a tight beam burst, encoded in a protocol that hadn't been used in 73 years. The sleeper's receivers, still active, still listening, caught the signal and processed it in 1.4 seconds. On the bridge of the Shrike, Rin Verk watched the object's black surface shift. The faint heat signature that had emerged during the engine start began to pulse, slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The weapon arrays, which had been tracking empty space, stopped their rotation and aligned with the sleeper's long axis, pointing toward nothing, toward everything. "What's it doing?" Dorn whispered. Verk didn't answer. He was reading a secondary data stream, a transmission that had just been relayed from the sleeper to his ship. It was short. 6 words repeated 3 times. The same message Siracade had sent. But now it had been processed, acknowledged, and returned with a single appended line. Request confirmed, awaiting final instruction. Duration, 73 years, 2 months, 11 days. Verk's breath caught. That thing has been waiting, counting, for 73 years. Dorn's face went pale. Counting what? The moment someone told it to stop waiting. Brock Thren did not retreat. He withdrew. There was a difference. One a commander admitted, the other he pretended never happened. His flagship pulled back to a safe observation distance, just outside the sleeper's projected weapons envelope. He watched the object on every sensor frequency, looking for weakness, for hesitation, for anything he could use. There was nothing. The sleeper simply hung in space, its engines warm, its weapons inactive but ready, its black hull absorbing the light from a nearby star as if it had been doing so for 1,000 years. His first officer, still pale, approached with a data slate. War Master, the Conclave is requesting a formal statement. 42 species have sent diplomatic inquiries. The Thren observers are. I know what the Thren are doing, Brock Thren snapped. They're watching. They always watch. And they'll file a report that makes me look like a fool. Sir, the humans have a small ship approaching the object. A corvette. It's not armed. Brock Thren stared at the screen. The Shrike was tiny compared to his battlecruiser, a speck against the vastness, but it was human. And it was approaching the sleeper without fear. Let them approach, he said quietly. If that thing is going to destroy something, I want it to be their own ship first. The Shrike nosed toward the sleeper's flank. Verk had received a docking coordinate from the object, not transmitted, but simply provided, as if the ship knew he was coming and had prepared a berth. The hull opened in the same seamless way it had for the Kroth, but this time the corridor inside was lit with a warm amber light, not the cold white of emergency systems. Artificial gravity, Dorn said, checking her instruments. Standard Terran G atmosphere breathable. It's like it was expecting us. It was, Verk said. It's been expecting anyone human for 73 years. He powered down the Shrike's engines and floated toward the docking port in his patched pressure suit. The left glove, taped from a cargo net repair, squeaked as he gripped the handrail. He entered the sleeper's interior, stepped onto a deck that felt solid beneath his boots, and looked around. The corridor was wide enough for 10 Kroth to walk abreast. The walls were a matte gray, smooth but not reflective, with no visible seams or panels. The amber light came from the ceiling itself, a faint glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. And at the end of the corridor, a single screen glowed with the same 6 words that had been in the transmission. The galaxy called it abandoned. The ship called it ready. Verk walked toward it. The screen flickered as he approached, then displayed a new message. Welcome home, Captain. Protocol Blackwell is active, awaiting your decision. He read the message twice. Then he opened his comm channel to Anchor Station Cade. Admiral, I'm aboard. The ship says it's ready for my decision. What decision? Sierra Cade's voice came through, calm as ever. The sleeper isn't a weapon, Verk. It's an inheritance. Protocol Blackwell was a construction program, 41 years of building, 9,400 engineers who never spoke of their work. They built something that could wait, that could be forgotten, that could be overlooked. But they built it for a reason. What reason? To answer the question the galaxy never asked. What if humanity wasn't weak? What if we had been building while they were fighting? What if our silence was preparation, not ignorance? Verk looked around the corridor again. The scale of it, the impossible 16-kilometer scale, was just beginning to settle into his bones. Admiral, what do you want me to do? Tell it to wait, and then tell it what it's waiting for. Sierra Cade set down her comm unit and looked at the sextant on her desk. The brass surface was warm from her pocket, the needle still pointing to Earth. She had kept it for 38 years, through 3 border skirmishes, through 4 promotions, through 19 years without setting foot on the planet it pointed toward. She thought about Blackwell, the classified file she had accessed 3 years ago, the one that mentioned a project no one had ever talked about. The file had been buried in Earth Naval Command's oldest archive, listed as Historic Engineering Review Decommissioned. She had almost missed it. But she had read it, and she had understood. Protocol Blackwell was not a weapon program. It was a bet that the galaxy would dismiss humanity as small, quiet, and irrelevant, that the silence would be mistaken for weakness, that no one would ever look at the Terran fleet, see nothing impressive, and wonder if they were looking in the wrong place. The sleeper was not the only thing Blackwell had built. It was just the largest, and it had been waiting for someone to remember the question. She reached for her canteen, took a cold sip, and composed a second transmission, this one encrypted, sent only to Verk's personal channel. There are more of them, not just the sleeper. Blackwell built a network, dead drops, dormant vessels, systems that have been waiting longer than anyone alive has been breathing. The sleeper is just the first one they'll find, but it has to be the one that sends a message. She paused. Tell the sleeper that the message is, we have stopped waiting. The transmission reached Verk while he stood in the sleeper's central interface chamber. The chamber was vast, 100 meters in diameter, with the engine core at its center glowing a steady, quiet blue. The screen had been showing the same message for the past minute, awaiting your decision. Verk read Sierra Cade's encrypted message. Then he looked up at the screen and spoke aloud, his voice echoing through the emptiness. Protocol Blackwell, this is Captain Rin Verk, Terran Naval Command, acting under Admiral Sierra Cade's authority. You are no longer waiting. The galaxy has remembered, and we are ready to show them what we built. The screen flickered. The blue glow from the engine core intensified. And then, for the first time in 73 years, the sleeper's hull began to emit light, not the absorbed darkness of its surface, but a faint, controlled glow from its weapon arrays. They were not targeting. They were signaling. A pattern, a message. On the cartographer's lament, Arkenvel watched the reading spike. The object's energy signature had changed from active to transmitting. It was sending something, a low-frequency burst, aimed not at any ship but at the void itself. What's it doing? Nissa asked. Arkenvel stared at the data. It's sending a signal, not to us, not to the Kroth. It's broadcasting to, he paused, calculating, to nearly 200 dormant positions across the galaxy. 200. 200, more than 200. The pattern is repeating, it's calling them. It's telling them, wake up. The broadcast took 42 minutes to reach the nearest dormant node. The node was not a ship. It was a relay station, hidden in the debris field of a dead star system, listed on no Terran registry. It had been there for 68 years. It had never been activated, but when it received the sleeper's signal, it flickered to life. And then it sent the signal further, to another node, and another, and another. Across the galaxy, monitors began to show anomalies, unidentified energy signatures, dormant objects that had been classified as debris suddenly pinging active, a chain reaction that moved faster than any fleet, faster than any diplomatic message, faster than any species could react. On the Dominion's claw, Brock Thren watched the displays with growing disbelief. What is this? He demanded. What are they doing? His first officer answered with a trembling voice. War Master, we're receiving reports from 17 different sectors. Unidentified Terran-class objects, all of them registering as active. Some of them are weapons platforms. Some are relay stations. Some are, he paused. We don't know what some of them are, but every single one of them is broadcasting the same message. Which message? The first officer held up the slate. It showed the 6 words that had been transmitted from the sleeper, now repeated across 100 different nodes. "We have stopped waiting." Brock Thren's jaw clicked, once, twice. A third time, he did not speak for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "Contact the Conclave. Tell them the humans have declared something. I don't know what. But it's not a war." "Then what is it?" Brock Thren looked at the screen, where the sleeper's glowing arrays continued their slow, deliberate signaling. He thought about the 4 species he had conquered, the 6 campaigns he had fought, the 200 years he had spent rising through the Kroth military. "It's a declaration," he said. "Not of war, of existence. They were always here, we just didn't look." On Anchor Station Cade, Sira Cade received the confirmation from Verk that the signal had been sent. She sat in her quiet office, the brass sextant in her hand, the cold coffee growing colder in her canteen. She had spent 38 years serving a fleet that the galaxy thought was irrelevant. She had touched the sextant every morning, reminding herself that Earth was still there, still home, still the only direction that mattered. But now the sextant's needle was wavering. Not much, just a slight tremor as if something had shifted in the cosmic field that anchored it to Earth. She looked at it closely. The needle still pointed to Earth, but it was not as steady as it used to be. She smiled faintly. "It's not just Earth anymore, is it?" She tucked the sextant back into her pocket and opened a channel to the Shrike. "Verk, the signal is spreading. How long before the galaxy knows what we've done?" "Admiral, the first nodes are already active. Within a week, every major species will have seen the pattern. Within a month, they'll understand the scale. Within a year. Within a year, they'll have to decide how to respond," she finished. "Good, that's what we wanted. Let them decide." On the cartographer's lament, Arkin Vel was writing the most difficult report of his career. He had catalogued 2,800 dead civilizations. He had never catalogued a civilization that had simply been hiding. He looked at Nissa, who was staring at the data with wide eyes. "What do we call this?" she asked. "We can't call it a weapon. It's not a weapon, it's not a warship, it's not even a fleet." Arkin Vel set down his stylus. "We call it what it is, a revelation. The humans have been building for decades, maybe centuries. They built something that could survive being forgotten. And now they've decided to be remembered." He wrote the report's title, "The Blackwell Network, a survey of non-military human infrastructure in the deep scatter and beyond." It was the longest title he had ever written, but for the first time, he wasn't sure he had enough words to describe what he had seen. Back in the sleeper's central chamber, Verk watched the blue glow of the engine core. The signal had been sent. The nodes were waking up. The galaxy was about to learn something that would change everything. He sat down on the deck, his patched pressure suit creaking, and waited. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know if the Conclave would respond with diplomacy or force. He didn't know if the Kroth would try again. But he knew one thing. The waiting was over. And that was all that mattered. The Shrike's comm unit crackled. Dorn's voice came through. "Captain, we're picking up a transmission from the cartographer's lament. It's a formal message from the Zethari Consortium. They're requesting a diplomatic meeting with Admiral Cade. They have questions." Verk looked at the engine core. "Tell them she'll be available, but remind them she's been available for 38 years. They just never asked." He stood up, walked to the Shrike's docking port, and looked back at the sleeper's amberlit corridor. The screen still displayed the 6 words, but now there was something else, a single line at the bottom in a smaller font. "Welcome home." He nodded to the screen, stepped into his ship, and sealed the hatch. Partition 2 ends here, with the sleeper's signal spreading across the galaxy, the Zethari requesting a diplomatic meeting, and Sira Cade waiting for the galaxy to catch up. The pause before the galactic response is the calm before a storm of reckoning. The Shrike had barely cleared the sleeper's docking bay when Verk's comm unit blared a priority alert from the newly awakened node network. He read the message once, then again, and his hand tightened on the control yoke. "Admiral, we have a problem. The node near Kroth Space, it's not a relay, it's not a weapons platform, it's something else, and it's broadcasting to the Claw." On Anchor Station Cade, Sierra Cade was already receiving the same data. She set down her canteen and stared at the readout. The node, designated Blackwell 014, had been hidden in the debris field of a system claimed by the Kroth Dominion for 60 years. It had been dormant the entire time. Now it was transmitting a constant, low-frequency pulse directly at Brock Thren's flagship. Not a threat, not a weapon, a greeting. Brock Thren received the pulse on his private channel. It was a simple sequence, a string of numbers and symbols that his ship's computers decoded in seconds. When the translation appeared on his screen, his jaw clicked once, twice, a third time. "We have watched you for 9,400 years. We have measured your campaigns, your conquests, your rise. You are not the first to assume silence is absence. You will not be the last, but you are the first to touch the sleeper and survive. Consider this a courtesy." He read it 3 times. Then he ordered his first officer to cease all transmissions to the sleeper and its nodes. He did not order an attack. He sat in his command chair, his 4 arms folded, and waited for the conclave to respond. Across the galaxy, the conclave convened in emergency session. Representatives from 38 species gathered in the Great Hall of the Zethari capital, a floating city of pale stone and energy fields. The Thren observers took their place at the edge of the chamber, their large eyes watching the proceedings with ancient patience. The humans had sent no representative. Admiral Sierra Cade had declined the invitation, citing operational commitments. But she had transmitted a single message to the conclave speaker. "The Blackwell network is not a weapon. It is a record. We have been keeping it for longer than any of your civilizations have been spacefaring. The sleeper is the index. The nodes are the pages. If you want to know what we have seen, ask." The chamber erupted into debate. Some species demanded immediate sanctions. Others called for a joint military expedition to seize the network. A few, the older ones, those with longer memories, fell silent and simply watched. Tal Viren, the Thren observer who had been watching the events from the cartographer's lament, rose from his seat and walked to the speaker's podium. He was 912 years old, his frail frame wrapped in simple gray robes, his large eyes holding the weight of 5 species that had risen and fallen during his lifetime. "You are arguing about a library," he said, his voice soft but carrying through the hall. "The humans have built a library that spans the galaxy. They have filled it with observations of every species they have encountered. They have been quiet not because they were weak, but because they were learning. And now they have decided that the galaxy is ready to read." A Kroth delegate stood, snarling. "They have violated our borders. They have hidden weapons in our territory." Tal Viren tilted his head. "Which border? The one you claimed 60 years ago. The humans have been watching for 9,400 years. They do not recognize your borders. They recognize only the patterns of rise and fall. And your pattern, War Master Thren, is familiar to them." Brock Thren, watching the session remotely from his flagship, felt the words land like a blow. He had been measured, he had been catalogued, and he had been found wanting. On Anchor Station Cade, Sierra Cade received a secure transmission from Verk, who had just completed a full scan of Blackwell 014. The node was indeed a data archive, not a weapon, not a relay, but a repository of historical records. It contained observations of every civilization the humans had encountered since leaving Earth. Millions of entries, spanning 10,000 years of galactic history. Verk's voice was strained. "Admiral, this thing is massive. It's not just data, it's analysis. They've been studying the galaxy like a science project. They have files on the Kroth, on the Zethari, on the Thren, on species that went extinct before any of these governments existed. Sierra Cade leaned back in her chair. She had known the network existed, but she had not known its scale. The sextant in her pocket felt heavier. Verk, transmit a copy of the Kroth file to me, encrypted. I want to see what they wrote. The file arrived in seconds. She opened it and read. It was clinical, precise, and devastating. It detailed the Kroth Dominion's rise from a regional power to a conqueror of 4 systems, and it noted the pattern, the same pattern that had led to the collapse of 7 previous civilizations. She read the final line. Projected collapse within 200 years if current trajectory continues. The sleeper's awakening may accelerate or delay this outcome. The species is capable of change, but only when its institutional framework is broken. She set down the slate. She had been in Earth Naval Command for 38 years. She had never seen a threat assessment this blunt, this without emotion, but she also knew it was true. The diplomatic meeting with the Zethari Consortium took place 2 days later, aboard the cartographer's Lament. Sierra Cade traveled to the Survey Cathedral in a small shuttle, accompanied only by a junior aide. She had declined the escort of warships. Arkenvel met her at the docking port, his 4-fingered hand extended in the human gesture of greeting. Admiral Cade. We have many questions. She shook his hand. I have many answers, but I need to know one thing first. What do you plan to do with the network? Arkenvel paused. The consortium is divided. Some want to study it. Some want to dismantle it. A few want to claim it as their own discovery. They can't dismantle it, she said. It's not a single structure. It's a distributed system. You'd have to find every node, every relay, every dormant ship. We built it to survive being forgotten. It will survive being attacked. Arkenvel's pale eyes widened. You built it to survive us. She smiled faintly. We built it to survive everyone. That was the point. During the meeting, Sierra Cade sat at a long table of pale stone, facing the Zethari delegation. Nissa was present, taking notes, her cracked slate tablet balanced on her knee. The atmosphere was tense but not hostile. She began her presentation with a single sentence. Protocol Blackwell was not a military project. It was a research project. We built the sleeper and the network to observe, not to attack. The weapons you saw on the sleeper are defensive. They were designed to protect the data, not to fight wars. A Zethari minister leaned forward. Then why did you hide it? Why not share your findings? Because we did not believe you were ready. The data we have collected shows a consistent pattern. Civilizations that learn too much about each other too quickly tend to destroy each other. We waited until we thought the galaxy had matured enough to handle the truth. And you decided that now is the time. She looked at the sextant in her pocket. We decided that the sleeper being found was a signal. The galaxy is changing. The Kroth are expanding. The Thren are fading. We needed to make sure the knowledge survived. The Thren observer, Tal Viren, had been listening from the gallery. He rose from his seat and walked to the table, his frail steps echoing in the hall. Admiral Cade, he said, you speak of survival, but what is it you wish to survive? Your species, your knowledge, or the memory of the galaxy itself? She met his ancient gaze. All of it. The network is a time capsule. It contains records of every species we have encountered, including those that have gone extinct. We believe that knowledge should outlast empires, and we believe that the galaxy has a right to know its own history. Tal Viren nodded slowly. Then you have done what the Thren attempted but failed. We have kept records of rise and fall, but we have kept them secret. You have made them visible. That is a gift and a curse. Which will it be? She asked. He smiled, a rare expression on his worn face. That depends on what the galaxy does with it. Across the room, Nissa was scribbling notes on her slate. She had been quiet throughout the meeting, but something was troubling her. She raised her hand. "Admiral, I have a question. The network, you said it was for observation. But the sleeper had weapons. Why would an observation platform need weapon arrays?" Sira Cade turned to her. "Because observation is not passive, it requires protection. And because the weapons are not for attacking, they are for making a point." "What point?" "That power does not have to be used to be effective. The sleeper's arrays targeted empty space. They did not fire. The message was not, 'We can kill you.' The message was, 'We have chosen not to.' That is a choice the galaxy has rarely seen." The room fell silent. Nissa looked at her slate, then at the Admiral, and nodded. She understood. Mid-collapse rehook, 70% mark. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Anchor Station Cade. H. Su's voice was tight, clipped. "Admiral, we've detected a new activation." "It's not one of ours." Sira Cade stood. "Explain." "A node near the Nereid shadow, the one you mentioned in the Blackwell file. It's broadcasting a signal that's not in the protocol. It's not human." "What is it?" HSU paused. "We don't know, but it's responding to the sleeper's signal, and it's sending a message to the Conclave, in a language no one has seen before." Sira Cade's hand went to the sextant. The needle was still pointing to Earth, but now it was trembling, a barely perceptible vibration. She looked at Tal Viren, who had frozen in place. "Tal Viren," she said, "what do you know about this?" The old Thren's eyes were wide. "There are older things than humans, older than Thren, older than any recorded civilization. The Blackwell network may have awakened something that was not meant to be awakened." "What is it?" He shook his head slowly. "I do not know, but the Thren have a record of a signal like this, a pattern. It appeared once before, 60,000 years ago, and then the civilization that sent it disappeared." The room erupted into chaos. The Zethari ministers shouted over each other. Nissa dropped her slate. Arkenvel stared at the data readouts. Sira Cade stood still, her hand on the sextant, her eyes on Tal Viren. She had spent 38 years serving a fleet that was small and quiet. She had sent the sleeper's signal. She had woken the network. And now she had woken something else. "Verk," she said into her comm, "get back to the sleeper. I need you to find out what that node is. And I need you to do it fast." Verk's voice came back, strained. "Admiral, the signal is spreading. It's not just one node. It's triggering dormant sites we didn't know about. We have no idea how many. Find out and report back." She closed the comm and looked at the assembly. "This meeting is adjourned. The network is no longer just a record. It may be a door, and I intend to see what's on the other side." Verk reached the Nereid shadow in 18 hours, pushing the Shrike's engines past their rated limits. The node was hidden in the gravity well of a frozen moon, its surface indistinguishable from the surrounding rock until his sensors detected the faint pulse, a rhythm that matched nothing in human code. He approached alone, leaving Dorn on the Shrike with orders to retreat if the signal turned hostile. The node's exterior was smooth, dark, and warm to the touch, not the absorbing black of the sleeper, but a material that seemed to absorb heat itself. He placed his gloved hand on the surface. A panel opened. A screen flickered to life, and Verk found himself staring at a language that predated every known civilization. The translation took 4 hours. The Shrike's computers worked through the alien script, matching patterns against every database in the Blackwell network. When the translation finally appeared, Verk read it once, then twice, then sat down heavily in his pilot's seat. He opened a channel to Anchor Station Cade. "Admiral, I know what the signal is." Sira Cade's voice was calm, but he could hear the tension beneath it. "Tell me." "It's a warning. From a civilization that existed before the Thren, before the Zethari, before anything we have records of. They saw what the galaxy was becoming, A cycle of rise and fall, conquest and collapse. They built something to stop it, but they didn't finish. What did they build? Verk looked at the screen. The Blackwell network, they started it. Humans finished it. The sleeper wasn't the first. It was the last. The node we activated, it was a handoff. They left the design for us 60,000 years ago, and we built it without knowing what we were inheriting. Sierra Cade was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "So the galaxy didn't find the sleeper. The sleeper found us, and we were supposed to wake it up all along." "Yes, Admiral, we were." The Conclave received the translation simultaneously. The ancient civilization's warning was stark. The galaxy's cycle of violence would eventually destroy everything. The network was designed to collect data on every species, to identify the patterns of collapse and to intervene, not with force, but with knowledge. It was the largest peacekeeping project in galactic history, and humans had been its guardians without knowing it. Tal Viren rose from his seat in the Great Hall, his voice carried across the chamber. The humans did not build the Blackwell network to conquer. They inherited it. They completed it. And they have been protecting it for 73 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. A Kroth delegate snarled, "This is a trick. The humans are trying to claim credit for something they didn't create." Tal Viren turned his ancient eyes on the delegate. "Is that what matters to you? Credit? The network exists. It has records of every species in this hall. It has predictions of every collapse, and it has a plan to prevent the next one. The question is not who built it. The question is whether you will use it." On the Dominion's claw, Brock Thren sat alone in his quarters, reading the full translation of the ancient warning. His 4 arms were folded. His jaw was still. He had been measuring species by noise and territory for 200 years. He had conquered 4 systems. He had claimed territory that was not his. And now he had learned that the humans he had dismissed as small and quiet, had been carrying a burden he could not have borne. He opened his comm to his first officer. "Send a message to the Conclave. The Kroth Dominion will stand down its military operations in the deep scatter. We will support the network's mission of observation." His first officer's voice was stunned. "War Master." "I said stand down. And ask the humans," he paused, "ask Admiral Cade if I can see the network's records on our species. I want to know what we did wrong, and how to fix it." Sierra Cade received the Kroth message while pouring a cup of coffee. She set down the canteen and read it twice. Then she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She opened a channel to Verk. "The Kroth have stood down. The Conclave is beginning to accept the network. We've done what we set out to do." Verk's voice was exhausted but relieved. "So what now, Admiral? Do we keep watching?" "We keep watching, but now we're not alone. The galaxy knows about us. The galaxy knows about the network, and eventually they will learn to use it themselves." She paused, touching the sextant in her pocket. "Verk, I want you to stay with the sleeper. Guard it. Make sure no one tries to dismantle it." "Understood, Admiral. What about you?" She looked at the brass sextant. "I have one more thing to do." The pre-climax mundane beat. Sierra Cade walked to her desk, picked up a small cloth and wiped a coffee stain from the sextant's brass surface. She did it slowly, carefully, as she had done every morning for 38 years. Then she set down the cloth, tucked the sextant into her pocket and walked to the docking bay. She boarded a shuttle and set course for the cartographer's lament. She had one final meeting to attend. The climax triad arrived in the sleeper's central chamber, where Sierra Cade stood before the engine core's blue glow. The entire Zethari delegation, the Kroth representatives, the Thren observers, and Verk were present. She had asked them to come, to see the heart of the network for themselves. She raised her voice so that all could hear. "No more watching, no more waiting, no more silence." The 3 short sentences echoed through the chamber. Each one landed like a hammer blow. This is the moment we stop being observers. This is the moment we become partners. This is the moment the galaxy begins to heal. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the sleeper's interface, the same interface Verk had touched. The screen flickered. The blue glow intensified. And then, for the first time, the sleeper began to speak, not in transmissions, but in a voice that carried through every node, every relay, every dormant ship in the network. Protocol Blackwell is complete. The network is open. All records are available to all species. The warning has been delivered. The choice is yours. The post-climax hook, as the assembly began to react, some in awe, some in fear, some in hope, Sierra Cade felt a vibration in her pocket. She pulled out the brass sextant. The needle was no longer pointing to Earth. It was pointing to the Nereid shadow. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she tucked it back into her pocket and said nothing. She did not explain. She let the others wonder. The quiet close came 2 weeks later. Sierra Cade stood on an observation deck of the cartographer's lament, looking out at the deep scatter. The sleeper hung in the distance, its black hull no longer drinking light but reflecting it, a soft silver glow that matched the stars behind it. The sextant was in her hand. She did not check it. She did not need to. The needle had stopped trembling. It was steady now, pointing not to Earth, not to the Nereid shadow, but to the empty space between, the place where the ancient civilization had left its final message, the place where the galaxy's future would be written. She turned away from the window and walked back to her shuttle. The galaxy was still out there, still full of species that did not know how to trust, still full of patterns that could lead to collapse or to cooperation. But for the first time in 38 years, she was not afraid of the direction she faced. She tucked the sextant into her pocket. She did not look back at the sleeper. She simply walked into her shuttle, the hatch sealing behind her, and began the long journey home.